Well, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Michael Moore. I've been a part of the security team for 3.5 years now, and I handle a ton of support tickets. So I'm excited to kind of go over the iThemes security setup essentials now. The main reason why I wanted to do this webinar is because we've had some new additions to the security plugin over the past year, and I kind of want to get everyone on the same page of what these different security settings can do for you, and also eliminate any confusion that anyone might have over any of the security settings. So how we're going to do this today, I'm going to go by each module, and at the end of each module, for example, the global settings module, we'll pause there, and then we'll go ahead and answer any questions you have over that specific module. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And again, those of you who are just joining us, we are having the chat at ithemes.com/chat iThemes.com/chat. All right. So the uh, first thing first, we have the WordPress security check. Now, the security check, what this is going to do, this is going to enable all of the recommended features um, that we recommend you enabling in iThemes security. And as you can see here, we're going to have the ban users, which will automatically ban users once they meet the threshold for a ban. Database backups, local brute force protection, which will monitor invalid login attempts and lock out anyone attempting brute force attacks. File change detection will detect any changes made on your site. Magic links which will prevent you from being locked out um, will prevent you from being locked out if you are under a brute force attack. The automatic malware scan scheduling, the network brute force protection, strong passwords, 2FA, user logging, and WordPress tweaks. Now to go ahead and enable these settings, you'll just click the secure site button. That's going to go ahead and run everything to you. Now this is a fairly new site saying my site does support SSL. So what it's wanting me to do is go ahead and redirect my HTTP traffic to the HTTPS traffic, which will help secure the communication between the client and your site. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then it's also asking me to activate the new network brute force protection. Now, what this will do is it will allow you to what the network brute force protection does, it enrolls you into the global iThemes network of known bad actors. And so if there is a known bad actor attacking multiple iThemes sites, we're going to let your site know that it needs to go ahead and block those people from even accessing your site. So I'm going to go ahead and activate that network brute force protection. And then now everything is set up from the basic recommended settings of the security check. Hey, Paul, I just saw that you're in the chat. I'm very, very happy to see you. And then CE, this is where you will ask questions. Now, we're going to go over the first module, and at the end of the first module, the global settings, we'll go ahead and pause there, and then I'll try to take questions over that specific module. All right, and then again, anyone who is just joining, we're going to have iThemes.com/chat. Thank you, Trish. iThemes.com/chat. So the very first thing you're going to see in the iThemes security global settings is it's asking you to give permission to your right to your wp-config.php file and your htaccess. Now, the reason why you want to allow iThemes security to do this is so you can have all the security rules to protect your site. So, for example, the htaccess is where the banned user IPs will go, which will prevent bad actors from accessing the site. So you're just giving iThemes security the permission to automatically secure your site. Now, the next thing you're going to see is just the host lockout message. This is what's going to be displayed to users or IPs when, displayed to users when their IP has been locked out. And as you can see, by default, it's just a simple error. So if someone gets locked out of their site, or you get locked out of your site, or someone gets locked out of your site, instead of seeing the login page, they'll just see an error across the screen, preventing them from even attempting another login. The user lockout message will be specifically for when a username becomes locked out. So it'll say you have, by default, it'll just say you have been locked out due to too many invalid login attempts. Now the community lockout message, now this is going to is what people are going to see when they have been locked out by the network brute force protection API, and it'll say that your IP has been flagged as a threat by iThemes security network. Now the next thing that we're going to see here is enable the blacklist of repeat offenders. Now this is going to allow iThemes security to ban IPs and username, or ban IPs that have been have met the thresholds for a blacklist. So for example, the blacklist threshold for a lockout is going to be 3 lockouts. So once an IP has been locked out from the site 3 times, it has met the requirement from the ban and will be permanently blocked from accessing the site. Now the blacklist loopback period or look back period will be 7 days. So this will mean if I get locked out of a site right now, it won't be until this time next week that lockout will be forgotten and will reset the blacklist threshold. So if from now until next Tuesday at 1:07 p.m. Central Standard Time, if I get locked out 3 times, I'll be permanently banned from the site. Now by default, your lockouts are only going to last 15 minutes, and then they'll automatically clear on their own. We have a cron event that goes and looks to make sure lockouts has expired. Then it'll go and it'll purge the lockouts who have exceeded the time limit. Now the lockout whitelist, this is where you can add IPs to the whitelist to prevent them from being locked out or banned from your site. I'm going to go and add my current IP to the lockout whitelist to prevent myself from being locked out into the future. And then let's log type is going to be the next option. Now you have a couple different choices for your log type. You have database only, file only, or both. Now I honestly just recommend using the database only log type because one, if you're storing the files on your servers, those logs can continue to grow and become quite large. And then also, in order for certain things to actually show up and get tracked in the logs, you're going to need to have them in the database. That's where you're going to be able to see lockouts and bans, and it's just going to be a more efficient, safer way to keep the logs. And then it's days to keep the database logs. Now you can set this to whatever you're comfortable with. I do recommend leaving it at the default of 60 days. And the reason why is you're going to want to keep that a history of the activity that happens on your site. And the reason why you want to keep a track of the activity that happens on your site is that way you can go and look at the different file changes. You can see a history of your malware scan, and you can see the history of your user logging activity. And this is going to allow the logs in the security dashboard to give you a good representation of what has happened on your site. Now, the allow iThemes to track your plugin uses via anonymous data. Currently, we are not collecting any data when we are using this, but we have let this option in because eventually we would like to be able to grab some data to see what you guys are actually using. It would all be anonymized, but at this current moment, it's not tracking anything, and then there will be we will disclose if that changes. Now the proxy detection, this is going to automatically check to see that we're using the correct proxy header. So if you have a CDN that you're using or a different proxy service, this will prevent that proxy IP from getting added to the ban list, which would cause your site to become inaccessible. Now the hide security and menu admin bar, if you click this, it will just hide the security menu right here. Now the next thing is going to be the show error codes. Now by default, it's just set to no, so the host lockout, the network lockout, and the username lockout, by default, those messages aren't going to show. And then the very final option, you can enable the grade report, and that will allow you to access the grade report module in case you want that enabled on your site. Now I'm going to go ahead and save these settings to the global settings. And then now that we're concluding with the global settings, I can go ahead and answer any questions we have about the global settings. Please use hashtag or bold questions. Perfect. You guys are already asking some questions. All right. Now we have from Paul, why does the brute force function require an email address? Should I put my address? The network brute force protection um, just allows us to authenticate that, and then we'll just give you a brute force API. But since you obviously have multiple sites that's already connected to the iThemes security, you can actually go into the network brute force protection, and you can reuse this API key on multiple sites if you would prefer to do that than entering in your client's email address or your email address. And if I use mine and later I no longer am working with the client, does anything need to be done for the brute force function since it has my email? Once you enter your email address, it will just be using that API key, and you won't really need to do anything from your end because the site won't be using that anymore. But that being said, if you are paying for iThemes Security Pro and your client you either want to fire your client or that client no longer wants to give you money, I would remove your tools from their site. Secure IPs often get banned from sites by iThemes Security, deciding they've checked files too many times. Has iThemes Security find a way to address that and keep that from happening? Now, the best thing to do is you can reach out to us or go to our help center, which will include a full list of the security IPs and you can add those to the whitelist. The reason why we haven't added those to the whitelist is because we'll make sure that we're updating and changing in the help center, but their IPs have been changing on a fairly regular basis. And luckily, Jonas, one of the people there at GoDaddy/Security, has been keeping us up to date with the IP addresses, but we do not want to automatically whitelist any IPs that have the potential to change. Question, would a VPN defeat the lockout by IP address? If you're using a VPN and so once that VPN IP does get locked out, then yes, that IP will be locked out. But let's say I'm using a VPN and then I decide to switch to a different server, so I'm now using a different IP, that server IP will not be locked out, but typically it's let's say it is a bot network that is coming from multiple different IPs. They're typically not smart enough to change their behavior, and they're going to end up running into the same problem they had before and getting locked out. And so once they run out of IP addresses, there's nothing they can do. Question, if you hide the security from the sidebar, how do you get back in? So the option that was in the global setting was to hide it in the admin bar. So that's just going to be hiding it at this top admin bar. It will not hide it on the side menu over here in the admin menu. Question, is there any way to hide the security dashboard page? Yes, there is. And once we get to the security dashboard, Paul, I'll show you exactly how you can do that. Okay, and then, so unless we have any more questions about the global settings, we can go ahead and move on to the notification center. All right, we're moving on. Okay, so the notification center is a great place for you to figure out what information you want to receive, what information you want to send, and to be sure that only the right people get the information. Now, one of the newer additions to the notification center is that we added the from email. So if you want to just use the default WordPress email, you can just leave it blank. But if you want to use a customized email address, you can add it there, and that's where the from email will be shown that it was sent by. Now, the default recipients, this is going to be a faster way for you to configure who you want the notifications to go to. So let's say you have a um, um, set of 3 different users that you want every single notification to go to. You can have that default recipient list. Right now, this site only has 1 administrator user, but so right now the default recipients would be sent to all administrator. If they add more users right here, I could just select the users I want to send. So let's say that you do have a client, they're paying for your services and the site, and they still want to be an administrator, but there isn't necessarily a reason for them to receive every email that they won't necessarily understand and cause them panic. You would just simply uncheck them from the default recipients box to make sure that they don't receive any notifications that could cause them confusion or cause you any headaches with having to manage their concerns. Now, the first kind of notification is going to be the automatic updates info. Now, this is going to be with the version management feature. So if you have any updates that were completed by the version management, it's going to send you the information of exactly what updates were performed. Now, the database backup, this is going to be the email address that the database backups get sent to. Now, you can see that there isn't a default recipient list here. So you just put in the email address or addresses that you want the database backups to automatically send to. Now, the grade report change email, this is going to be with related to the grade report feature. So if you're relying on that to kind of give you an idea of what security improvements you can make on your site, and then for some reason it changed, let's say you now have a WordPress is out of date, it will send you a notification telling you, hey, just let you know, your security grade has been lower, and here's why, and here's the steps you'll need to take to resolve it. And then we also have the inactive user email, which is part of the user security check settings. And what the inactive user emails will do, will send you a list of users of any users that have who have not been active in the last 30 days. Now, the reason why you would want to be notified of inactive users is you can remove them from your site, because the less unused users and less unused plugins and less the less people who have access to the site, it limits the number of points of entry into your site. So the more that you can lock it down by getting rid of inactive users and getting rid of plugins that are or themes that you're not using, the better. Now, magic login link is what we were talking about earlier. So we added this because, unfortunately, if you're under a brute force attack and they're using your username, you're going to want to lock out that username. So even if you add your IP to the whitelist, that's great. Your IP won't be added to the whitelist, and you'll never see a 4 or 3 error. But if you are under a brute force attack and they are using your username, we still want to lock out the username to put a stop to the brute force attack. But unfortunately, what that meant in the past was that you had to go and manually clear out the lockout. That way you could still log in. So to get around that, so we can keep blocking out the bad guy who's trying to use your username, what we can do is send you an email with a magic link that you can just click, and then it will automatically log you in, bypassing the lockout, so that your site can be secure during the brute force attack, but you can still go and get your work done. I'm a big fan of the magic link feature. Now the malware scan result, what this will do is once you enable the malware scan scheduling module, it will send an email if it discovers any kind of issues, and that way you can take a look at it and address it. Now the security digest, you can enable this if you want to get a summary of the security events that happen on your site. You can schedule it for daily or weekly. And then keep in mind that if you because if you are under a brute force attack, unfortunately, iThemes security isn't very humble, and so it wants to let everyone know how great of a job it's doing. And typically, you don't need to receive a notification for every single lockout because there's no action really for you to take. The plugin is taking care of it for you. It's automatically securing your site by locking out people who are trying to intrude. But unfortunately, it does like to brag. It creates a ton of notifications. So what you can do is disable the individual lockout notifications, enable the security digest. You can still get a digest of the activity happening on your site without flooding your personal inbox with a bunch of information, with it just telling you that it's already taking care of a problem. This will also include file change detection scans and different like privilege escalations. If you escalate a user, it will let you know that that happened as well. Now, this is the settings import and export feature, or email notification. So if you ever export your settings, it will send a JSON to the email address that you want to send it to, and then bypass this on an earlier one too, but you can customize what these emails look like using these different tags, and that way you can personalize these messages to your clients. So if they do get locked out and they see the option to send a magic link to their notification, you can put whatever message you want here to give them exactly the information you want them to have, and that would be the same with the settings export. Now, again, this is a site lockout. What this will do, anytime there's any kind of lockout on your site, it will send you an individual notification. If you are under attack, I would definitely recommend unchecking this box and just receiving those notifications via the security digest, because again, once you get the site lockout notification, there's really not anything for you to do since the plugin has automatically locked down your site for you. Now, the two-factor email, what this is if you enable two-factor on your site and you have the also enabled the email method of two-factor authentication, you can customize how this message looks right here, and then this will be so once they do log in and you have the email method enabled, it'll send them the code that they can either copy and paste, or now they can just click to continue button, and it'll automatically log them in without them actually having to enter in the token. The two-factor email confirmation, what this does is once a user has signed up for two-factor, this is going to send them a confirmation of the two-factor. Now, the two-factor reminder, notice if you're using the security check and you're wanting to remind, let's say, privileged users, people who can edit the site, that you would like them to use two-factor, you can send them a two-factor reminder notice. Hey, admin user, would you please use enable two-factor on the site? If you have any questions about how to enable two-factor, please let me know, and I'll help you set this up in any way, or help you any way that I can to get this set up for your account. Now, that is going to wrap up the notification settings module. But so let's go ahead and see if we have any questions about the notification center before we move on. Okay. All right. Question: is there a way to reset inactive users so it starts the time frame again, or is it unnecessary? For example, if I missed that a WP user was inactive for 30 days, will I be notified again? Yes, Paul, you will not need to reset it. You will be notified again if that is enabled. Once the next inactive user email goes out, anyone that hasn't logged in for the past 30 days, you'll be notified of those, even if it's been 60 days. Is there a way to see a full security log rather than a summary? Once we get to the security logs section, C-Man, I'll try to answer that question to see exactly what you mean, see if we can narrow that down for you. Melanie, is there is there a way to get useful information in the email, like what files have changed? Now, the file change detection email is going to, the individual file change detection email will show you a list of file changes. And you can also get the information from the logs or from the security dashboard, both of which I need to speed up a little bit because try to get through some of this a little bit faster so I can show you some more of the stuff. Okay, so let's, do we have any more questions about the notification center? Let's see, is it, before we move on? Okay, so let's go ahead and speed this up a little bit. So we're going to do the 404 detection. So I'm going to go to enable that. And then what this is going to do, the 404 detection feature, it looks for people, it keeps an eye out for people who are looking for files that do not exist. So if they're looking, just kind of prodding around for certain vulnerabilities, what will happen is once they meet the error threshold of 20 or more 404s, they'll be locked out. And the minutes to remember the 404 error is 5 minutes. And why the reason why this is low is if I am someone on your site who is just typing in the wrong URL multiple times, I'm not an attacker. I'm just making a mistake in my typing. And so it doesn't need to remember while I'm searching the rest of the site that those 404s ever happen. Because with these bots, what they're doing, they're going to be hitting these 404s super, super fast. And so they'll hit that 20 error threshold way before the 5 minute check back period is back. Now down here, this is where you can exclude files from the exclude these files from counting towards lockout. So even though that you exclude the file, even though you exclude the 404, it was still going to show up in your logs, but it won't count against someone being locked out. Now, that was quite a quick rundown of the 404. Do we have any questions about the 404 detection? All right. Hey, Carrie, I am hoping to get more of that kind of stuff, like more in-depth information about each module on the YouTube channel, which the handout that will be attached once this gets to the iThemes catalog will have a link to the YouTube channel, a bunch of other stuff. And I'm really, that's one of my biggest goals for this year is to really improve the documentation and get more things on a conveyed and communicated in a more user-friendly way that focuses on just normal people setting up their sites and not, you don't have to be a developer to understand it. So that is definitely coming. I'm working on some stuff right now, but let's go ahead and move on. So the next one is the away mode. And what this will do is once you enable this and it becomes active, no one will be able to access the login page. So anytime anyone tries to access the login page, they'll automatically be redirected back to the site's homepage. So what does that mean is let's say that you know that you will never be working on the site and no one will need to log in the site on a nightly basis from like midnight to 6 a.m. You can enable this from midnight to 6 a.m. and anyone trying to access the login page will automatically be redirected from the home page. Now, there is a way to disable this. You can reach out to support and we'll tell you how to disable it. Or if you have sync, you can manually enable or disable away mode from the iThemes sync security module. And then, so the next one we're going to have here is the banned users. Now, you can enable the HackRepair.com blacklist feature, which what this will do is Jim Walker has the HackRepair.com. He has a good blacklist, which is a good starter kit of blocking bad actors from your site. Now, the enable ban list will allow you to add IPs to the ban list. So let's say that you have a automatic. First of all, iThemes security will automatically add any of the IPs that have reached the requirements and the parameters that have been set for a ban. All those ban IPs are going to go in this list right here, preventing them from ever accessing the site. Do we have any questions about either away mode or this ban users feature or the ban users module? All right, let's keep it going. Save those settings. Okay, so the file permissions, what this will do is just after you click the load file permissions, it'll give you a warning of if it'll give you a warning if the actual permission value on your server doesn't meet the suggestions. And as we can see here, I need to log into my server and tighten up these permissions on these files. That way, it's not everyone can access, read them, and write to them. And so, you need to tighten that up a little bit. So that's just a recommendation. And if for some reason your host or you feel like the file permissions that we have suggested are too stringent, it is definitely up to you have the prerogative to set them to whatever permission level you feel comfortable with. Now, and if you have any questions about how to change the file permission, I would suggest reaching out to your host because they'll be able to give you the FTP or cPanel credentials that you need and the exact step-by-step directions of how to change those files for you. Question CE, ban on the ban users, if you get a site lockout email for a host making too many attempts to access a file which doesn't exist, should it automatically get added to that list? If they meet the, okay, so let's say that IP has been locked out 3 times. So they get locked out one time, 15 minutes later after the lockout clears, they go ahead and start accessing a bunch of files again. They get locked out, that lockout clears, and once they hit the default 3 lockouts, they'll be added from the ban list and they won't be able to keep poking around the site anymore. And then question from Paul, is there any reason why file permissions should not follow the iThemes proper file permissions? So like for example, let's go. Like these WP config and AC access, we recommend the more stringent 444 permissions because these are sensitive files, and we personally feel like that is the correct file permission for those files, more restrictive. But if you look at WordPress, the WordPress codex, you're going to see the file permissions are actually a little bit more of a flexible 644, which is still going to be tighter than the 755 that's recommended for everything else. But so we are taking it one step further than the WordPress.com or WordPress.org codex recommends. And if you feel more comfortable with going with the WordPress codex, or if you have a specific, or if your host has a specific reason why something needs to be able to write to that can't do it under the 444, you're going to want to use the file permissions that work best in your environment. So while these are suggestions to get you started on the right track, ultimately it's up to you to enable and use the features that work in your environment. It's it's not necessarily a one size fits all, it's what's best for you. The yellow warning, JJ, means that, okay, so the status is yellow right now because all these suggestions right here are what we suggest, the iThemes security team suggests your file permissions should be. And as you can see, none of them match because the root directory is the suggestions have it set to 755, where currently is set to a more open, gives more people more privileges to that file using the 775. So that's why it's giving me the yellow warning, because this is a suggestion to me to go ahead and modify my settings to make them a little bit more restrictive of who can do what. And then on the banned users, should you mainly add the IP host to the list if you see some activities across multiple sites and never seen an IP automatically get added to the ban list? If you've never seen an IP automatically get added to the ban list, you might want to make sure that you have enabled the enable the blacklist feature in iThemes or in the global setting, and enable the ban host list in the ban user settings. And honestly, like, there's not really ever a reason for you to have to manually add IPs to the ban list. But again, if it's we're trying to give you the tools and you get to use them how you want to. So if it makes you feel better and more comfortable by manually adding to the ban list, feel free. But if the IPs are doing something that they're repeatedly doing something that is considered bad activity, they're going to automatically get added to the ban list. One of the reasons why you use a security plugin is so you can spend your time doing other things while the plugin will automatically lock down your site when it's noticing this negative activity happen. So I would recommend spending your time on growing your business, growing your traffic, doing what you need to do, and letting iThemes Security keep an eye out for this activity that warrants a ban. Jesse says, I have the same numbers as you, but some of mine are green and some of mine are yellow. Yours are yellows. Why? Jesse, I'm not sure about because the only reason why that they should be green is if they actually match. But yeah, I'm honestly not sure. That's I would have to take I'd have to see that in action, actually give you an actual good answer. More secure is always better if it is an option. I've had issues, but I can bypass my adding the code to the directory HTTP access now a particular plugin in the rental folder. Yes. JJ has a question. So how do I adjust the settings to be stronger? The file permission settings, you can reach out to your host. You can reach out to your host to figure out exactly how to change those file settings. Now let's go ahead, for the sake of time, let's go ahead and move on to the local brute force protection settings. Now these are going to be the settings that are going to be the basic parameters for a lockout and ban. So the max login attempts per host, so that's going to be IP. Max login attempts per IP is going to be 5 attempts. After 5 failed attempts, an IP will be locked out. Now, the user is going to be a little bit more friendly. The reason why we have it to be a little bit more friendly is because, as an example, my wife and I were doing our taxes. I sent her the password over LastPass that she could use to log into our TurboTax account, but for some reason when she was copying and pasting it, she was copying the incorrect password, and so she ended up getting locked out. But so since she got locked out, but since I was a legitimate user from a different IP address, I was still able to log in with the correct credentials. So is this going to allow more flexibility before the actual user gets locked out? So a bad actor using that IP is going to be locked out, while you, coming from the good IP, being the actual user, you're going to have a few more attempts before you aren't able to access the site. But again, if you do get locked out, not a big deal, because you can enable that magic links feature. Now, the remember to look back, minutes to remember a bad login attempt. Again, this is 5 minutes, and the reason why it's 5 minutes because typically, if it's an actual person making the mistakes, they probably won't meet the threshold of 5 bad login attempts in 5 minutes. But a bot, they're hitting your site and doing tons of multiple login requests at the same time, and so they're going to meet the threshold for a lockout way faster. So you don't need to look back any further than 5 minutes, because it's a computer, it's efficient, it's going to meet the requirements for a lockout well within that 5 minutes. And then the automatically ban admin user, it says it's going to immediately ban a host that attempts to log in with the user admin. That is, it's actually just going to lock out the user. Now it says ban. I'm not. We really do need to update the verbiage on this, because it's not going to immediately ban a user that attempts to log into the a user using the admin username. It's going to lock them out. But again, once they so they log into the admin, The default lockout time is 15 minutes, and after the lockout clears in 15 minutes again, they use admin. That's 2 lockouts, and once they hit that 3 lockout threshold, they will actually be banned from your site. Now let's go ahead and save these settings. And then, does anyone have any questions over the local brute force protection? All right, let's the question, do you want to check? Oh, just yes, probably. This is just a test site. This site will probably be taken down if this webinar is done. I would love admin users to be banned, really banned. No, Paul, I agree with you. I can definitely. I'll have a conversation with Timothy, the developer, about that and see if um, that is something that we can do, or try to figure out the reason why it's not. Hey, your 2 cents are good. Your 2 cents are worth more than some people's dollars. Okay, so we have password requirement. Now the first option on the password requirement, excuse me, I had to take a drink of water, is the first password change. And what this will do is if you click this, it will force every user to change their password on their next login. So even if you do not at this moment have a good password strategy on your site to help lock down your WordPress login, to help secure it, you can go ahead and enable the strong password requirements, and then you can force the password change. So the next time everyone logs in, they'll have to meet the new password requirements you just set. So the first one being is the forces users to use strong passwords. So if they want to use 1, 2, 3, 4, that password will be rejected. They won't be able to save it, and they'll have to choose a strong password. Now the next one is the password expiration. You can set the minimum role of password expiration. I would suggest setting this a little bit higher, just for people who can actually make changes to the site. And you can set the maximum password age to whatever you decide. Whatever you decide, but the 120 days is the default, but you can make this longer, make it shorter. But really, the one of my favorite features in the plugin is this refuse compromised password feature. What we have done is we're using the Have I Been Pwned API, and so if any password has been used in a database breach, because what happens is people will they think they have a secure password, they'll reuse their password on multiple sites and not know that their password has been a part of a database compromise, and so someone can get that information and log into the site. So what we're going to do is we're going to refuse anyone to use a password that has been known to be hacked. And I would recommend setting the minimum role to subscriber. And here's why I would recommend setting the minimum role to subscriber is solely for the fact that, especially if you're running some kind of shop, especially if you are running some kind of shop and someone compromised their account, guess what's going to happen? They're going to blame you. I can think of a specific example where someone in my family, one of their well, let's say which one. It's their Salesforce account got hacked, and they got all the lists that they had for their Salesforce account, and they blamed Salesforce. Salesforce said, "Okay, here's a refund on some of the things that you purchased," even though this person in my family, they were, I'm not going to say who it was, so I don't want to embarrass them, but they were reusing passwords. They weren't using a strong password. They didn't enable two-factor authentication. They likely had a password that was a part of one of these large database dumps, like either from Yahoo or Facebook or wherever. And so they were just trying out those combination of username and password all over the internet. Ding, ding, ding. They got into a Salesforce account, and he blamed Salesforce, even though the his account becoming compromised was really his fault because he wasn't using a secure password and he wasn't using two-factor. So the reason why you want to set this as a subscriber is because you don't want to be blamed for them for their inability to secure their account. And so yeah, that's a great feature. And then going to save those settings. Do we have any questions about the password requirements? What message shows up to the user on a compromised password? It just says, hey, let you know, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it pretty much just says, hey, let you know this password has been involved in a database breach. Pick another one. Don't use this one. And the great thing about that, you're also letting this also informs them that you're doing them a service because they now know that they need to go update their password everywhere because the one that they're using on all their sites, their bank account everywhere, has been compromised. So it's the that Have I Been Pwned API. They're really doing a great public service, and we do appreciate them creating the API and us being able to use it in the plugin. Now the SSL setting, or do we have any more questions about the passwords before I moved on? Okay, so the SSL feature, just going to go over this real quick. It'll allow, if you have an SSL certificate installed on the site, it will redirect all your traffic from HTTP to the more secure HTTPS. And it seems like in most cases now in 2019, hosts are installing a certificate for you and they're handling the redirect for you. If they are doing that, you will not need to use this feature. But if you're installing the certificate by yourself and want a quick, easy way to redirect all the traffic, this feature is for you. Do we have any questions over the SSL feature? All right, let's go on to the system tweaks. All right, so these are going to be more of the like server protection kind of settings. So the first one is going to be protect system files. So prevent public access to the readme.html, readme.txt, wp-config, install.php. So this prevents anyone from actually being able to view these files. And then it's also going to kind of help tighten up those permissions for you. And then the next one is disable directory browsing. So if this prevents users from seeing a list of files in a directory when there's no index file present. So for example, I know that the Secure recently started checking to see if directory browsing was allowed for directories that had no index file. If you do get that warning, enable this setting right here. It's going to meet that recommendation, and you'll no longer get that warning from Security. And then filter request methods. This will filter out hits with a trace, delete or track request methods. This should not be enabled if you use the WordPress REST API. So if you do use the WordPress API, make sure that you're not checking this because that will cause conflict. Filter suspicious query string. So this is often a sign that someone's trying to gain access to the site. So you can kind of check that, and that will make sure that the query strings and the URL are like this, what you would expect, and not like they're fishing around trying to find an exploit. So this filter out non-English characters from the query string. This is will only work. This should not be enabled on non-English sites. I wouldn't necessarily enable that at all if you don't need to. Filter out long URLs. Again, this is just another way of someone trying to inject something in the URL string. So you can set that to a minimum. It actually restricts it to being no longer than 256 characters. And then so anything over 256 characters won't be able to run. The remove file writing permission. So this is going to be on the htaccess and the wp-config from the file permissions list we saw earlier. This is going to go ahead and change them from 444 to you. So it's going to change them to our recommended file permission settings. But if you decide to disable that in the future, it will change it to the WordPress.org codec 664 recommendations. Now, the disable PHP and uploads directly will block PHP's scripts from going in the uploads directory. This will also block requests in the plugins and the themes directory, which will just kind of help protect you from certain kinds of attacks. Now that's going to kind of wrap it up for the system tweaks, but do we have any questions over the system tweaks? Can you check the boxes as you go that you are recommended, that are recommended? Yeah. Yeah, I can start doing that from now on. And the system tweaks, go back here real quick. I would protect system files. I would do the directory browsing. Most of the time, like now, you might have something using WordPress REST API, so you might not want to. This will be definitely dependent on you. If you can check this, that's great. If it causes a conflict in your environment, don't check it. And then I do the filter long URLs, and then all these. The idea really is to enable as many of the features and the options as you can in your environment. Not necessarily all of them, because again, it isn't a one hat fits all kind of solution. It's what's going to work best in your environment. Like for example, the reason why they're in the recommended settings, it just enables things that we can guarantee aren't going to cause a conflict on your site. But and really, it just as far as I've had problems with some of these boxes being checked, which ones can be a problem. Again, that's going to be dependent on your environment. Like there's some that there's going to be some like because there's so much that happens that is going to affect whether or not this which one of these settings have something on your site. Because other plugins and themes are going to throw in more variables. Then you also have your WordPress stack. Then you have your server stack, and then you have mod security within your server stack. Then you have a multitude of server configurations. So can't guarantee any of them won't cause any problems on your site. But if you do end up running into issues, just let us know, like create a support ticket, and we can kind of help you narrow it down. And then let's move on to the network brute force protection. We kind of talked about this earlier. This is just going to enable you to automatically ban IPs that have been reported as a problem by the network. Okay, let's go back. WordPress salts. Okay. So what this is going to do is this will change your WordPress salts, which is like the little security keys you see in your WP config file. This is if you are concerned about this is going to automatically log everyone out, and it's going to make I'm not going to actually do this right now because it's logging me out, and we don't want to log that out right now. But notes like right here, changing all the salts will log you out of your site. So what this is going to do, you have all these different hashed password-like security keys in your WP config, and you can use this to change them if you want to periodically change them to make sure you're not using old, and then people who may have access to your site who have copied the keys prior, like if you had a vendor, like let's say you have a vendor who's looking at your, like let's say that you give me your credentials, I get your FTP credentials, I have to go and look at your WP config for whatever reason, or you share a copy of your WP config with the support person, then that might be a good time to reset your WordPress salts. That way those security keys are not known information. Let's see. Why would you not want to reset salts? Just I'm not one of it's really not going to cause any problems on your site. There's no reason not to do it other than I don't want to be logged out right now. And then let's for sake of time, let's go to WordPress tweaks. So okay, this the remove the Windows Live writer header. That probably really isn't a concern anymore. This one's probably not really a concern anymore. Reduce comment spam. This can definitely help cut down on some of the comment spam if with like no refer or user agent identified. So if it's not telling you who it is, then it's not. They're not going to be able to add a comment. The disable file editor. This is going to remove the ability to, like if you go to, because you know how you can, by default, WordPress allows you to edit files from within WordPress. When you disable the file editor, it removes that ability, and you have to log in via the FTP or through the terminal and actually edit these files using a text editor as opposed to be able to do it within WordPress. And what this is good for is, one, it can help prevent users from making unnecessary changes to any of the plugins or seeing unnecessary edits. And then the XML RPC, this is one that can possibly cause a conflict if you're using Jetpack or some other things that require you to have XML RPC enabled. Now, one of the things that happen with XML RPC, it allows you to do multiple authentication attempts per request. So this will allow them to literally do 100 attempts at a username and credentials at a single time. So, like I was saying earlier, bots are super effective and efficient at reaching that threshold of how many ever lockouts or whatever, because they can literally do hundreds of requests at the same time, or you can block multiple authentication requests using XMRPC, and you can still enable this feature right here by blocking multiple and then leaving this enabled right here, so you can let like Jetpack or whatever else would possibly need that run. And then the WordPress API, now you can restrict access to it because they can access the WordPress API and get a bunch of information, such as like user data, and this will block them from actually accessing the page that can have some of that information there, the restricted access, or you can give it default access if you want to, which will then allow people to access that private information. So I definitely would recommend having this set to restricted. Display or disable login error messages like we were talking about earlier. You can disable the like host lockout messages and host lockout message, network boost protection lockout message. So it won't say if you've been locked out for too many invalid login attempts. It won't tell you you've been locked out for too many invalid login attempts. Now, one cool thing about this feature right here, the force unique nickname will force people when they're creating a user to use a unique nickname, which makes it harder for people to harvest usernames and logins by like simply looking at author pages. So if you don't use this feature, the username will automatically be displayed on the anyone who's written any content for the site. And then the disable users author page if their post count is 0. And so again, so if you have people who aren't posting on the site, who don't make any changes, or who don't need who have no edits or anything, you can prevent those names from being displayed on the user archive, which again it works kind of along with this one, making it harder to harvest those usernames to try to do a brute force attack. This protects against tag napping. So if something is alter the target blank links to protect against tab napping. Enabling this feature helps protect visitors to your site, including login users from different kind of phishing attacks. If you want to read more, there's an article about tab napping that is included in the settings. Now, you could, by default, WordPress allows users to log in using the username or email address. If you would prefer that people only be able to use email address or only be able to use username, you can. I never really adjust it from the default on this on my site. You can mitigate attachment file traversal type. There was an issue with this last year with a WordPress vulnerability, and this help to mitigate an attack where users with the author role or higher could delete files in your WordPress installation, including sensitive files like the wp-config.php. And so when this happened, Timothy went ahead and added some extra protection for the site. All right. Sorry. Thanks. Sorry. Hey, yeah. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. Sorry, this is um, going a little long, but I'll try to speed it up a little bit. But before I move on, does anyone have any questions about the WordPress tweaks? All right, let's move on. The magic links feature is what I talked about earlier. If you someone's using your name on a brute force attack and your username gets logged out, you'll still be able to log in because we'll send you a magic link to your email address to your email. You'll be able to click that link and bypass the lockout. The malware scan scheduling is going to enable the security to it'll enable security to automatically scan your site twice a day to check for malware. Privilege escalation. What this will do, let's say like let's say you have a user call support, and that user by default is set to a subscriber, meaning they won't have any privileges to make any changes to your site, but you don't have to create a new user every time a third-party vendor needs to access the site. So you can just go to the user profile page of that support user, temporarily move them from a subscriber to an admin. That way, they can have the necessary privileges to change the site. But 24 hours later, that status will automatically be revoked and be moved down to the subscriber. So we were talking about the inactive users earlier. It won't be as big of a deal just to leave this temporary user only used for third-party vendors, because even if someone does end up getting brute force, they won't have any permissions to actually make any malicious changes to your site. So that's a good one to use, especially if you have third-party vendors who need to come look at your site, and you don't have to create a specific user for them every single time. Now the reCAPTCHA, this is the Google reCAPTCHA, and then we have, so you can use version 2 Invisible CAPTCHA or reCAPTCHA version 3. You can use these links right here to go to your Google admin console, generate some site keys and secret keys. You can enable the GDPR opt-in, on-page opt-in, and then you can choose where you want the reCAPTCHA to be shown, and then adjust the dark theme. You can also adjust the lockout arrow threshold, so people can fail the reCAPTCHA 7 times before they trigger a lockout, and then you can do the lockout checkback period, which again is going to be 5 minutes. Again, that's probably going to be good because a bot will hit that in a fairly short period of time. Whoops, I can't say that because there's no, I didn't do anything to it. The settings import and export feature is going to allow you to create an export, send it to the email address of your choosing, and then once you have that, export. Let's say I want all these settings from this site to be brought over to a new site. Export it from here. Once I log into the new site, I can upload it, the file from my local machine, and import it to these settings. So these settings will be imported, and I don't have to manually configure it. But please do keep in mind that some of the settings, like reCAPTCHA, are not going to transfer over just because the site and secret keys will be like site specific, and there's going to be certain site specific settings that will not be site specific setting that will not be transferred over and migrated to your new site. Now, the security dashboard, if you enable this, what this is going to do is, first of all, let's take a look at here. Now, let's say you want to disable specific users from creating any kind of dashboards. You can disable that by, right now I only have one user, and if I don't want myself to be able to see any of the security dashboard settings, I could check this and that would remove my ability to see them. But let's go ahead and take a look at the, all right, okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the security dashboard real quick. Now you can create a security dashboard, and there's a great video on our YouTube channel that you can see instructions on how to set this all up and what all these different cards do, but this will grab the information from the logs, break it down into more bite-sized chunks to give you specific information. So if there's any lockouts, histories of lockouts right here, it would show you a history of the lockouts, history of the banned user. This card gives you a history of all your past malware scans, and then it gives you links to see additional details in the actual logs. And then let's go back to our security settings. Now, I've gone through a bunch of stuff just because we're short on time. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to two-factor authentication? All right. Now, two-factor authentication is probably one of our most effective features of securing and locking down your site. I just posted a video on the YouTube channel about how to enable two-factor authentication and using Authy on your site, and why I like Authy over the other authentication apps. So the first one is the different authentication method. There's 3 different authentication methods. I recommend giving people the ability to choose all of them, but we have the mobile app option, which is going to be using a mobile app such as Authy and Android. And again, you can check out the YouTube channel to see the exact configuration of or exactly how to configure it. The email option is going to send time-sensitive codes to the email address that they can use to then log into their site. And then the backup authentication codes, if these 2 methods fail for whatever reason, you can use these one-time passwords. And then the user type protections, this is going to allow you to force two-factor on specific users. You can do all users, not recommended because you don't necessarily want to force it like on a customer. Privileged users is recommended. You can also choose to select the roles manually, and so you can choose exactly what user role you want to be forced to use two-factor. You can disable the force two-factor authentication for specific users. So let's say you don't want to have the subscriber user role to be forced to use two-factor. You can disable that for them. Vulnerable user protection. So let's just say that someone is using a weak password, or the site has been under a recent brute force or the user's username has been used in a brute force attack, or if for some reason this user is considered vulnerable, what you can do is automatically have this user who's been flagged as vulnerable to have to use two-factor. That way, if they say they are getting used under that username is being used on a brute force attack, they will then be required to enter in an additional two-factor token that the brute force attacker would not be able to have access to, preventing them from being able to successfully log into the site, which is great. Enable force two-factor on vulnerable site protection. Let's say the site's running outdated software, or for some other reason has been flagged for being vulnerable. You can enable all users to use two-factor, locking down the site automatically, increasing the security until you can go in there and make the necessary changes to remove some of the things that have been flagged as a vulnerability. So now let's say you do decide to force two-factor on first login or on users. You can disable this checkbox, which will remove the requirement of actually having to set that up on their first login. And if you don't, they'll get a nice kind of onboarding welcome to two-factor. Hey, your user's required to have two-factor. Let us walk you through how to set it up. You can create your own custom message, give them the exact information to your client or customer or the other admin users on the site, letting them know what the expectation is and what they need to do. And then you can also use application passwords to allow authentication using like the REST API or XML RPC. Now, again, sorry about going over, guys. I'll try to speed this up, but before we move on, do we have any questions about two-factor authentication? All right, again, there's a great YouTube video, and then the handout that you guys will be able to get once we get this replay posted in our training center is going to have a list of all the settings, and it's also going to give you some useful links like to our help center, which has some good documentation, to our YouTube channel, to our blog, and then also to links to the YouTube live Q&A/giveaway that will be coming up on next Wednesday. And then, so let's go ahead and move over to user logging. What this is going to do is going to keep track of user activity that's happening on your site. And the reason why this is so imperative is, let's say that someone does end up hacking your site. You can use that information to figure out what happened once that account was breached. If you go back and take a look at the Disaster Week Day 2 webinar that I did, you'll see on the second half of that webinar of an instance where I saw in my logs that, it looks like I have a malware scan, a failed malware scan, and I was able to use that information to go look at the logs, see that a new user was created, a new admin user was created, and I was able to track all their activity, figure exactly what they were doing on my site once it was breached. And then the user security check is going to give you an overview of all the different users on the site, whether or not they're using two-factor, what their password strength is, the last time they were active, how many different sessions they have. This isn't surprising because I was doing testing on multiple browsers earlier, so I'm going to have a logged in session from that. I can click this log out everywhere else button if I do not expect to see my user be logged out in anywhere besides this location. I can click that button and then log it out everywhere else. Now, the version management is really cool because one of the number one reason why how people get hacked is by running outdated software or using software that is like plugins that are vulnerable. We've seen a lot of that recently, and what you can do is you can enable WordPress to install the latest WordPress releases. You can enable all your plugins or themes to automatically be updated, or you can set it custom. You can delay how long you want to wait after a release. This is, if you haven't taken a look at the version management setting before, I would implore you to go take a look at these so you can make sure that you're using the latest version of all the software you have on your site, because the number one reason WordPress sites get hacked is from running outdated software. And then just like we had in the two-factor settings, you can strengthen sites when running outdated software. This is going to add, force people to use two-factor. Is going to disable the file editor, disable XML RPC pingbacks, lock down your site when you're running software that's over a month out of date. It's going to lock down your site automatically to make sure it's protected and add extra layer of security for you automatically. Now, the trusted devices feature is really cool, but do keep in mind it is in beta. And what this does, it is going to protect you against session hijacking, and also once this is enabled, it's going to recognize the actual device I'm on as a trusted device. So, if I were to enable this right now, it's automatically going to know that the Mac laptop that I'm using associated with this IP address, these are safe devices. It's going to add my Mac as a trusted device, but let's say that once I go home, I log into the site, it's not going to know my new Mac, right? So what's going to happen is it's going to restrict my unrecognized logins. It's going to restrict my capabilities down to that of a subscriber. I will no longer have admin privileges until I get the notification to confirm my device and my email address. Once I confirm that device, I will be able to again have admin privileges at my house. And why is that important? Let's say that someone does actually manage to brute force your user, they still won't be able to do anything because they're not going to have access to your email address to add their device as a trusted device. So they're not going to be able to make any malicious changes to your site. So this is just another way of iThemes security locking down your user, even if it does become compromised, you're still going to be in a much better position because of they're not going to be able to make any changes. And then you're also going to have a login alert up here in your admin bar saying, hey, there's this unrecognized device. What do you know about it? And if you don't know about it, you're going to be able to block that person, that device, from ever being able to access it again, and then your problem is solved. And to increase the geolocation to be able to really identify the device, we recommend that you try to download some of these MaxMind databases and these different static map images APIs. What that will do is give you a nice little map to show you exactly where these IPs are being located to help you make a better decision when it comes to either adding them as a trusted device or blocking them as a bad device. And then finally, we have the gray report feature, which is going to, in the actual setting itself, let's say you have some admin users that you don't want to see the grade report, even see the grade report option, you can disable that for them, because there might be a specific setting that you get that the iThemes security grading system will mark you down for, but you have a legitimate reason why you aren't using that feature. You don't need any of your clients to see that site or see that, so you can disable that to prevent them from even having that option. And then to actually see the grade report, you just go over here to your admin menu, and it's going to take you to this list. And see, right now it says I have a C, and because of 2 issues, and it's going to show you why I have these issues. And then I can just go ahead and select the all resolvable issues and resolve selected issues, and it's going to take my grade from the C all the way to an A, because it implemented the changes on the site that I needed to make sure it was secure. Okay, so sorry I went a little bit long, guys. Like there is a lot here, and I understand that. And then we're going to make sure that once this replay is up, I'm going to make sure that we get this uploaded too, which is just a quick little book, every single setting, every single module, what's in it, what does it do. You can just get a quick rundown of a quick little explanation of every little thing. And then I just want to let you guys all know that we do right now are running a special on iThemes security, where you can get 35% off of all iThemes security products through April 30th. And then you can use the coupon code ITSEC35 to get 35% off of iThemes Security Pro, Plugin Suite, and Toolkit plans. Whoops. Didn't mean to exit out of presenter mode, but let's go ahead and go back in here. And really, I just wanted to grab a couple of these links for you. So I'm going to go to post in the chat. This is our YouTube option. Oh, Jesse, you probably don't see the grade report option. Go to your global settings and scroll down to the very bottom of the global setting page. I can just show you real quick. So you go to global settings, scroll down to the very bottom, and make sure that you have the grade report enabled. And then that will show, once you have that enabled, it'll show up down here. And so the first link I'm going to give you a link to our YouTube channel. And the reason why is I'm just going to try to put more and more tutorials there. And hey, Julie, do me a favor. If will you create a support ticket? That way, because I'm not exactly sure what that could be, but then but if you can create a support ticket, either Gerald or I will be able to help you kind of get that narrowed down. Okay, so the first link is going to be the YouTube channel. We're going to try to put more and more tutorials about all things WordPress there. So make sure that you're make sure you're subscribed there. That way you won't miss any of our videos. We're also wanted to include a link to our help center. This is going to have our documentation, which is Also something I am working on improving this week. I'm really hoping to get to the notification center to kind of update what is in there and kind of break it down a little bit more, less of a description, more of a how to use it. That's what I really want to do this year, is really focus on the documentation and not necessarily just have a description of everything, but like how to use it, what does it mean to you, which I'm really excited about doing because I think that will help. The next, I just wanted to give you a link to our blog because we do have security content there as well, and which will have good information. So I did an article or a blog post recently about security myths debunked, which was a good one. And then Trish, you're very welcome. It's definitely something that I think we can do better as far as the documentation is concerned. And the next thing is pretty exciting that I want to share. We're doing our first YouTube Live event, and if you register using that link below, you're going to be entered to win a free year subscription to iThemes Security Pro, and then you can use this link, which is the event URL, and then once you click on that link, you can click the little bell to remind yourself that is happening. So make sure you're there, have your questions ready, because it's going to be if you have a question, we want to answer them, whether it be about WordPress security in general, or if it is an iTheme specific question. Go there. We're going to be spending 30 minutes just talking to you and grabbing questions directly from the chat, and I want to be able to answer as many questions as I possibly can, and because my goal is WordPress security and web security in general can be intimidating, and it really doesn't have to be. And just like with the documentation, with the plugin itself, what we really want to do is demystify all of it, and give you guys the information that you need to make informed decisions on your site and not have to worry about it. So, and be able to secure your site without having to be an expert, but at the same time having the confidence to know that your site is secure. So, if you have any requests on documentation or videos that you would like, go to we have at the YouTube channel, we have a playlist, a WordPress security playlist that sorry, I'm trying to find that link for you. A WordPress security playlist. In any of those videos, just leave a comment about a tutorial video that you would like to see, or a piece of documentation you would like written to, or a blog post article that maybe you would want covered. That way you can have a question answered that way. So if you can't make that, feel free to submit a question there, and then we'll try to make that happen for you. But hey, once again, I just want to thank everyone so much for showing up. I really do appreciate it. Because the truth of the matter is, the majority of WordPress hacks are completely preventable, and the biggest vulnerability in WordPress is its users. So you guys taking the time out of your day and being proactive about the security of your site, all that's going to do is give the WordPress community a better reputation when it comes to security. It's going to help grow the community, and it's going to be better for all of us. The more secure our sites are and the more of a proactive approach we take, is just going to make the community grow and give everyone more opportunities. So hey, thank you guys so much. I do really appreciate you showing up. And again, we are here to serve you. So let us know what we're not giving you so we can give it to you, okay? Hey, thanks so much, guys.